Tally-ho! As I've hinted in my other videos, it's now time for the Pacific Salt review. The Spyderco Pacific Salt, which will be getting compared to the Spyderco Tenacious here. And I'm going to go through these talking points I have over here off to the side one by one, and we're going to find out if more money leads to a better knife. The results may be surprising to some. So, starting out with size, the Spyderco Tenacious here on the top is 7 3/4 inch overall open, with a 3 3/4 inch blade. And on the bottom here we have the Pacific Salt that is 8 11/16 inch overall open and 3 13/16 of an inch overall, or blade length, excuse me. So as you can see, it's a little bit bigger here on the Pacific Salt with a little bit bigger blade. Not much difference in the blade size, a little bit more different in the overall length. Both really good for EDC length. Okay, now the weight, 4 ounces versus 3 ounces, the Tenacious being 4 ounces and the Pacific Salt being 3 ounces. Not really bad for EDC, but that will bring up one of my first talking points about the differences between these knives, going from the entry level into the mid-range Spyderco. The weight, while it is more on the Tenacious, I believe that I prefer that. And the reason, jumping a little bit ahead to things like the material and what they're made out of, the reason for that is the bottom here, the Pacific Salt uses the FRN handles, fiberglass reinforced nylon, which is basically a type of plastic. And this uses G10, which is basically layers of fiberglass. I much prefer the G10 handles. These really great, love the grip. The G10 scales on this really give a quality feel. On the other hand, for the Pacific Salt, this FRN stuff, not really that. It feels cheap. It's got grip. I mean, it has a lot of grip. It might even have more grip than the G10, but it definitely suffers from a cheap feeling. It feels like it's a cheap plastic. Not extremely cheap. I mean, I understand that a lot of things are going the way of composite recently. I mentioned that Luminox that I had, the first Luminox that I had that was made out of some sort of carbon fiber, but it definitely suffers from a little bit of a cheap feel on this FRN. And that's my thoughts on the weight. So again, 3 ounces, 4 ounces here. Okay, blade style between the two. What we have here is a combo edge that I had on my Tenacious, and plain edge here on the Pacific Salt. My thoughts on this. Didn't like the combo. Well, I never really had a problem with the combo edge. It's just that when the serrations start to get dull, they are a pain to sharpen. I know that the Spyderco Sharp Maker says it can do them, but I sharpened them with the Sharp Maker, and I'm probably doing something wrong, but they never really got back to that factory sharpness. Whereas if I sharpen just a plain edge, I can get it definitely back to factory sharpness, if not sharper. So it's definitely... But that's also going to be personal preference too, because the combo edge is good for digging into some sort of synthetic if you have paracord or rope, but I've never had a problem cutting paracord with the plain edge either, so I don't think you're really gaining enough with the combo edge. So the winner on the blade style here is going to have to go to the Pacific Salt. I like the plain edge a little bit better. Let's see, grind is what we're going to be talking about next. Top, fully flat ground, love it. I love the look of fully flat ground knives. They're just, I think, the best grind in my opinion. Bottom, hollow ground. Not a particular problem, but again, if I had the option, I would go fully flat ground. So the winner here, again, would be the Tenacious, but that's probably a personal thing, just because if this came fully flat ground, I'd prefer fully flat ground. The spider hole, this is another important point. The top one is the 13mm spider hole, and here on the Pacific Salt we have the 14mm spider hole. So you would think that the bigger one would be better. However, I actually prefer the smaller spider hole for this reason here. It's very personal here because it is my thumb size. If I stick my thumb in here like I want to flick it out fast, you see the speed that comes out with. That 13mm hole is perfect. It catches just the tip of my fingernail, and I can just flick it out fast. The 14mm, on the other hand, lets my finger go in too deep. So as such, it gets too much of my finger in there, and I don't really get a good opening. I actually have to pull my finger out a little bit so I can flick it open. So If you're going to be using it with a glove, which that is its intended purpose, that's why it's so big. If you're going to be using it with a gloved hand, maybe you're going to prefer the bigger hole. Myself, I just actually prefer the 13mm hole of the Tenacious. Moving on, the speed of the blade opening. Again, I'm reading off a list of talking points here, and this is a good one that it comes right after the spider hole, because as I've just showed you, I can open this either due to the fact that it has steel liners and bronze phosphor bushings. I'm not sure if this has bronze phosphor bushings in there. I do not know. There might be, there might not be. I doubt it. But due to the steel liners and the bronze phosphor bushings of this, I can open this thing lightning fast. I actually fool people into thinking it's assisted opening sometimes. On this one, because of the heavier blade and because of the no liners and perhaps no bushings, I have to flick my wrist. I have to get that flick of the wrist in there in order for it to even open fully. Not so with the Tenacious. Tenacious, I can hold my wrist steady and flick it right open. So speed again goes to the Tenacious. As you can see, I've given quite a few of these categories to the Tenacious, and so the price differences are not really going in the Pacific Salt's favor yet. So we'll get to that a little bit later, though. Carrying options. Ooh, this is another big point. Carrying options. I always prefer carrying tip down. So a lot of people prefer carrying tip up so you can draw it and then without having to switch your grip and open it and stuff. I never quite got that. I have always preferred carrying my knives tip down. And not even for a safety reason. I know that's a big point that some people say. I just prefer carrying them tip down because I think it's easy just to come into my pocket, tip down, and it's open. Do not like carrying tip up. But with the Tenacious, you're given the option to carry tip up, tip down, right or left side. You have all four corners open to you because it uses the three bolts here, the three screws. And I have tip down on the right side. Unfortunately, on the Pacific Salt, you are forced to carry it tip up. Not really thrilled about that. You can switch it from the left to the right side, but you have to carry it tip up, and I don't really particularly think that's good. That's something to keep in mind if you like carrying tip down. I don't see why they couldn't have given us a tip down carry option here. Maybe it wouldn't work with the shape of the knife, but I prefer that. Anyway, next, the clips. Clip on the Tenacious here is uncoated stainless steel. It's got the spider etched in there, the Spyderco symbol. And on here it's titanium, and it's coated black just like the blade. So my thoughts on these, they're pretty similar. On the Pacific Salt, you can see it's more of a flat thing, where this comes out to more of a rounded shape. Not really one or the other. I don't really prefer one or the other. I don't prefer one or the other shape-wise or aesthetics-wise. However, the secureness of the clips is something that I'd like to mention. On the Tenacious, when you have these three screws screwed down tight, you can move that thing left and right. It won't even move a millimeter. There's no play in the clip at all. You can move it back and forth. It won't move. However, with the Pacific Salt, because it's held on with a some sort of one big fat screw rivet thing, and it's a square end here, this clip ends in a square end, I can actually move this clip back and forth a little bit. Let's see if we can see that. I can move it back and forth, so it's not as secure, and I don't, that's another thing that again, I have to give that to the Tenacious in that respect, because this clip doesn't move when it's secure. Not that I think this is going to fall off, I just think that it could be a little bit more secure. I definitely can feel it moving enough to make it a talking point. Another thing, this is uncoated. This is coated, and the coating is not very good on this. As you can see there, the silver, the coating is coming off. The coating is coming off of this titanium pocket clip here. So, I mean, I use my knives, so I'm not going to really care that it's coming off, but if you're somebody who gets all freaking out when they see the coating coming off, that is a point I need to make. Now, the locks. This Pacific Salt here is a lock back with the dent there, so you know exactly where it is if you're going to reach for it. And the Tenacious is the liner lock. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but I actually much prefer the liner lock. So again, the Tenacious is going to win here. Let me tell you why. If I open up the Pacific Salt here, and it's got the liner lock. If I want to close this with one hand, I either have to hook my finger in the spider hole here and push it down and do one of these things, or push the blade up against something. Either way, it's going to either require, or do the two-hand thing. It's either going to require an awkward movement of the hand, two hands, or pressing up against something. Neither of which options I think are nearly attractive as the liner lock and the Tenacious, where I just push in with my finger, push out with my other finger, push in with my thumb, and push out with my other finger. Real simple. I know people get caught, and I've even done it on the Tenacious, but I guess that's just one of the hazards of the liner locks. I guess so. Again, even the locks here, I much prefer the Tenacious. And with the locks, I'll talk about blade play. Tenacious, no blade play whatsoever, up or down, left or right. Spyderco Pacific Salt, no blade play left or right, no blade play up or down. So, I mean, I wouldn't really expect any less from the Spyderco in that respect. Okay, blade steel. Now, this is another important point here. On the Tenacious, we are using the 8CR13 MOV blade steel. And not really good resistance to rust. It actually rusted within the first week that I had it, just from moisture in the air. I had some surface rust on the blade. And we're using the H1 on the Spyderco Pacific Salt. H1, rust proof. Not only is the steel rust proof, the blade is also black coated, unlike the Tenacious. So that also aids in the rust resistance. The steel is rust proof anyway, so you can't rust it anyway. And I love that blacked out blade look. That is, as I mentioned before in another video, that is the reason I chose this knife. You do not see many blacked out Spydercos. Actually, I have to stop it here, and I'll edit these parts together in iMovie because my memory card is full. So I will be right back after some sort of cool transition. And I'm back. Aren't you glad you stayed to watch that transition? So, next, I left off on the blade steel, and I'll still be talking about that blade steel. H1, rust proof, and the 8CR13 MOV, not very good at rust proofness. Another important point about these knives, and it may just be me, but I actually believe it's not just me. I can actually get the H1 a considerable amount sharper than the 8CR13 MOV. But the thing is, it won't hold its edge as long out of the box. H1 is what's called work hardening. The more you sharpen it, the longer it will hold its edge. And I've definitely found that out to be true. The 8CR13 MOV, I could get sharp, quite sharp, but I definitely can get the H1 sharper. And I'm going to show you cutting the H1 here. Right now, the Tenacious is not actually sharpened, so I can't do the cut test with it. So, but this is what really impressed me with this H1 steel. See if it's sharp at all. Whoops. Well, it's a little weird to get this in the camera shot. Hold on. And now it's getting paper stuck on the blade, so it's starting to do that. But let me wipe the blade off here. So as you can see, it is ridiculously sharp. As for how long it held the edge, though, as I mentioned, not as long as the 8CR13 MOV. I'm actually touching this up about every week. I do a weekly ritual where I take care of my Zippo, take care of my knife, and take care of my watch, make sure they're all running fine. And I have to touch up the Spyderco Pacific Salt here every week. I don't say I have to, but it's much better to touch up your knives than let them get dull and resharpen them. And so when I touch them up, basically it's going from it'll cut paper, but it might rip the paper a little bit, to it just cuts cleanly through. I mean, definitely would still be sharp enough for utility tasks, but if you want it, scary sharp, I touch it up every week. But I'm having to do it less often now. I've had this for about a month. I'm having it to do it less often because of the work hardening. Now, handles. I already mentioned this. This is G10 wafers. This is fully FRN. Much prefer the G10. Much prefer the G10. It just definitely feels so much more well made than this plasticky feeling FRN. And that is a big point if you're wondering if what you should take, G10, FRN. I much prefer the G10. Construction, again, another point that goes to the tenacious. Screwed construction, it takes a torque screw, T6 and T8 torque screws. So if you need to clean it, and I have done this, take it completely apart, you can do that with a simple torque screw set. On the Pacific Salt, it is pinned, so you cannot take it apart if you need to. Even though there are torque screws on the back, you cannot take it apart, because the other side doesn't have torque screws, and you can turn that all day and it'll never come out. I've tried holding them, you cannot get it apart, trust me. And price. The price on the Tenacious cost me $30, and the Pacific Salt cost me $60. So going down the list of criteria I had, let's see if more money leads to a better knife. Oh, by the way, a point that's not here, but gets a lot of people sometimes because they're like that. This Spyderco H1 Pacific Salt was made in Sakai or Seki City, Japan. This one was made in China. Now, so, given those prices, let's see the points here. How many did the Tenacious win versus the Pacific Salt? Size, about the same, didn't give it to either. Weight, I actually gave it to the Tenacious because I preferred it a little heavy. It felt a little more quality, but that's up to you. Blade style, I gave that to the Pacific Salt. Grind, I gave that to the Tenacious. Spider hole, Tenacious. Speed, Tenacious. Carry options, Tenacious. Clips, about the same. The Salt having that issue with the coating coming off. Locks, I gave that to the Tenacious. Blade steel, I gave that to the Pacific Salt. Handle material, I definitely gave that to the Tenacious. Constructions, Tenacious. Price, Tenacious. So, do you get what you pay for in these knives? Well, yes and no. The Tenacious definitely seems like a much better value because it did win a lot of these points here, and it definitely feels like a much better made knife. But then again, you also have to remember that I gave the steel to the Pacific Salt. I definitely feel that it has a better steel out of the two. Not considerably, but it's definitely better. Mixed that, it has the rust proofness, it has the ridiculous sharpness. So the steel goes to the Pacific Salt. So I hope that anybody having a Tenacious out there looking to move up in the Spyderco world to the Delica, the Centafonte, any of those things, or the Salt line, I hope I gave you some insight. And anybody just looking at this for a review of the Pacific Salt, I hope I helped you out too. So thanks for watching this video. You guys have yourself a wonderful evening.